All right, what is up, everyone? We are back. We're back once again, this time for game 4 of the NBA Finals. Here are some Showdown, DFS picks, lineup advice, DraftKings, and FanDuel. Heat versus the Nuggets. Nuggets are up 2-1. Betting markets believe that they will get the job done fairly soon. But we're going to break down what this slate is and how it's different from the previous 3 NBA Finals Showdown slates. Welcome, I'm Brian Jester, co-founder at Occupy Fantasy, joined once again by our lead NBA analyst, Chuck Silver. Chuck, it's been a busy day, man. I know you're probably like me. I was doing best ball drafts earlier. I just finished a UFC show. Now I'm doing an NBA show. I'm sure you can relate to all the juggling of the various activities.
Oh yeah, I mean that's every day for me. Not necessarily those exact things, but yeah, I have my hands in as much stuff as possible. So it's grind season right now. NBA season ends in probably on Monday when the Nuggets win Game 5. But yeah, a couple more days of this, and hopefully we get another game. I'd love it if the Heat won today. We got a Game 6, but I wouldn't be surprised if Nuggets closed it out in 5.
Fair enough. So this show is normally driven by the viewers. As you see, this is live. So if you have any questions about tonight's slate, about the game in general, go ahead and throw it in the YouTube chat here to the right of the screen. We'll happily answer them as they come in. And otherwise, we're just going to break down the slate mostly for tournaments. That's a more exciting avenue, and mostly on DraftKings since they have the bigger prizes potentially. So let's just get it started, Chuck. And we've talked every single slate pre-lock. Has anything changed? And I asked you this question. I've asked you this question each of the last 2 times we've done this video. Has anything changed really in your mind that says that we should approach this game dramatically differently?
Dramatically differently, no. So we do have a little bit more confirmation of what the rotations look like, specifically for Eric Spoelstra and the Heat, because he's had different guys closing the fourth quarter every time. But the last 2 games, we pretty much saw Caleb Martin and Kyle Lowry play the entire fourth quarter. Gabe Vincent closed in the previous game, but game 2 he only played about half the minutes, and then in game 2 also Duncan Robinson played in the fourth quarter. He didn't really in game 3. So I think that's a big thing. It's to me, I have to assume that the game plan is to close with Caleb Martin and Kyle Lowry, depending on if they're playing terrible or maybe someone else is playing really well. Kevin Love was a big thing on the previous slate because in game 2 he started after not playing at all in game 1 and he got 22 minutes. A big thing in game 2 was he got that second quarter rotation where he came in for about 6 minutes, and we haven't really seen that in the playoffs too much. And so he did play 22 in game 2, but he lost that second quarter rotation in game 3 and he only ended up playing 16 minutes. We have Kevin Love projected for 17.4. I kind of feel like the industry is over projecting Kevin Love a little bit, and his ownership is super low still, 23% on the flex and 4% on DraftKings captain. And so I'm still going to be getting to Kevin Love a bit, but I'm a little bit nervous. Just he's not going to close, and so it's kind of tough. And then the other big thing is this Christian. What do we do with Christian Brown? I mean, he's getting more minutes because he's playing out of his mind. He shot 7 for 8 in the last game. Like in game 2, if you asked me, I would have said that was probably a 95th percentile outcome for Christian Brown. And then game 3 was absolutely a 99th percentile outcome. The best game of your life coming as a rookie in the NBA Finals. And they only raised his price to 2,200 on DraftKings. So I'm getting there a little bit more than I was on the last couple of slates, but it's not someone who I'm like dying to get to. We're showing him for 9% ownership in the flex, 0% in the captain. I wouldn't be surprised to see him as high as 5% in the captain and, I don't know, 3 times that in the flex, maybe close to 30%. Like, he was the optimal captain last slate. I've been talking about Bam Adebayo is probably my favorite captain option, and he's still going to be, I think, the best captain option today, especially if you're playing cash. But for GPPs, they barely raised his price, and just compared to Jokic, Butler, and Jamal Murray, to me, his price makes the most sense to be the best captain. He's my highest owned captain today.
That is Bam.
Yeah, Bam Adebayo. And then with Jokic captain, so last time I mentioned that for him to be the winning captain, he probably has to outscore the second guy by 20 fantasy points. And we saw Jokic put up 80. Like, he way overperformed his projection. But Jamal Murray put up 66, and then Bam put up like 50. And so if Christian Brown didn't do what he did, I'm pretty sure Bam would have been the optimal captain. He was the captain in the second place lineup.
Yep.
And so I'm still going to get to Jokic and captain a bit. And one thing I did want to mention, I couldn't find the data for game 3, but for game 2, the top 100, I don't know if it was NBA DFS players or just DFS players overall, but they were very overweight to Jokic captain, which kind of surprises me because I think it should be the opposite. Just
Right.
like, yeah, Jokic has a good chance to be the captain. He's going to put up the highest score on the slate, but when we win with a Jokic captain lineup, we're chopping probably 100 ways, 200 ways, and so it just and the likelihood of it happening, I'm not sure. I'm still getting to some Jokic captain, but I think the captains I want to get to mostly today are Bam Adebayo number one, like very firmly number one, and then the GPP captains, low owned. Someone was asking about that in the Discord. If you're in here, Kyle Lowry, and I'm still going to get to MPJ a captain. If his ownership is going to come down, like he was playing like terrible, and he lost some minutes, but I'm still going to be getting to MPJ as a good GPP play.
All right, so lots of stuff to digest there. Appreciate the breakdown, Chuck. And the key takeaway for me is, again, as someone who doesn't play NBA DFS regularly, but is familiar with NBA DFS betting and familiar with recency bias, I mean, to me, it's just the pure zigzag theory once again, right? We mentioned Haywood Highsmith was going to be high owned after game one. We mentioned Kevin Love was going to be high owned after game two. We mentioned Max Strus as a great play after shooting 0 for 9 in the first game, right? And all these things are going to regress. And we probably see it regress when it's that big of an outlier nearly immediately. Now, Christian Brown's one thing. Like again, his price only up a little bit, but to me, talk about Michael Porter Jr. being low. Again, if you base it on his last two games where he scored combined like 23 fantasy points, he's way overpriced in quotes at 7K. Kevin Love, people won't go back to as much because he didn't play as much and he didn't produce as much on a point per minute basis as he did in game two. And then Christian Brown, who's only up a little bit, people are going to play him because they saw him win last game. So, I mean, it seems very clear from a GPP perspective what you have to do here. But again, I'm not the NBA expert here. Correct me if I'm wrong if you think that strategy is offline.
No, I mean that's basically what I do. Like I'm more interested in playing the guy who had a poor game last time. Like I thought MPJ was a good play last game. Nothing's changed. Like he had a bad game. It's not like this is the rotation. I mean, we're used to seeing him play 40 minutes in the playoffs, and so if it drives down his ownership, it just makes me want to play these guys even more.
Fair enough. We have another question here about if you play Braun at captain, right? And we saw the winner. It was just, I think, 3 ties in the big GPP on DraftKings last time out. He was, 2% in the flex on FanDuel for the people who won over there. And I think the biggest eye opener, at least for someone or for people who play NBA Showdown regularly, that winning lineup, Chuck, on DraftKings had, $1,500 or $1,600 left over. And if you look at it, they may seem kind of crazy, but then if you just dive into it a little bit, you see that what could you really do with that $1,500 to upgrade because he's so cheap? And I think that's a big note here, right? There are pockets and gaps in salary tiers on this slate, and as it has been for most of the finals. So the question we have in the chat is, if you go back to Braun captain, do you need to leave over $2,000 on the table, or you get similar, or can you leave even less?
So you don't need to leave like $2,000 salary, but when you're playing, say, a Christian Brown captain, a low-owned captain, it's still possible to have a duplicated lineup if you play, the quote-unquote the obvious lineup when you just plug in Christian Brown, your hand building, and then you just put in whoever fits with the salary.
Right.
And so you do want to get away from just playing the 50K salary. Something interesting today, I don't usually do this with my whole set. I try to go in, like, if I'm playing Jokic captain, maybe I'll put a salary cap so that I'm not just duping 500 times, but I didn't really get any lineups that are using all of my salary today. And I don't necessarily have a cheap guy in every lineup. Like some of my lineups, my cheapest guy is Duncan Robinson, Kyle Lowry, Max Strus, and then other lineups, the cheapest guy is Christian Brown, Jeff Green. And so that's something that just I didn't, like I said, I didn't plan to do it, but the way that my lineups came out today, I'm just naturally leaving. Like my top 3 lineups are all leaving over $1,000 on the table. They all have Bam at captain. And then even my Christian Brown, I'm not playing Christian Brown at captain today, and I have him a little bit in the flex. But if you are playing Christian Brown at captain, I think the only thing is just make sure that it's not the, quote unquote obvious lineup. If you want to leave a couple hundred in salary, that's fine. A big thing too is that the scoring was so top heavy last game. Like Jokic, Bam, and Jimmy, or not Jimmy, Jokic, Bam, and Jamal all put up huge scores. And I want to say Kevin Love was actually in that winning lineup with Christian Brown captain, even though he only put up a 9 DK points. And like I've talked about before, all these mid-range guys, a lot of guys here are capable of putting up close to 30 fantasy points, and no one did it last game except for Aaron Gordon. He was also in the winning lineup. And so I would be surprised if none of these guys put up a score again, and that's what enabled Christian Brown to be the winning cap. Obviously, the 23 fantasy points helps, but I mean, if Christian Brown puts up 12 tonight, then there are ways that he can be the winning captain, yeah. But I'm not playing a captain. Like I said, I'm getting him a little bit in flex, but it's a tough call. I'm not quite sure. I think his minutes are going to be a little over projected. He's probably going to be a little too owned, so it's just someone who I'm going to try to not get to as much if I can.
Fair enough. And you mentioned Adebayo leaving $1,000 or more on the table, which again, if someone's listening, they may think that seems nuts. But I have the screen, the DraftKings screen pulled up here. If you see Adebayo's price at captain's 14.1K, the next closest is Jamal Murray at 17.4K. That's a $3,300 difference, right? So it's not like you can't use that money to upgrade. He doesn't have to be the highest scorer to be the optimal captain, as we talk about many times on this show. So we see Swerve Baby in the chat, who's active in our Discord. He says, "Let's go, Occupy best in the biz by far. Original, real, truly care about us." With the 100 emoji. Appreciate you, Swerve Baby. Thank you for tuning in. Tori in the chat, Chuck says, "Who's your favorite single entry small field DraftKings captain?"
It's Bam. It's just I personally don't love playing Bam in DFS. He's pretty frustrating player, but we have him projected for 40 minutes. He's going to play the most minutes on the Heat. Something weird with Jimmy Butler. Like, these guys to me should both be playing 44, 45 minutes, if not the entire game. It's NBA Finals.
Right,
so I'm a little confused why they're not getting like these full runs. Like Jokic and Jamal played 43 and 44. But Bam, yeah, like you said, just given the price, I think is just very clearly, if you're making one lineup in a small field contest, it should be Bam and captain. Like, Bam was the winning captain in small field last time. People didn't get the Christian Brown captain in small field, so
True.
I think that's the move there, and it lets you have a lot of flexibility with who else you want to fit in.
Yeah, man. Give them AAU minutes. Come on, run these boys 48, right? 3 games on
Seriously,
the weekend.
it makes no sense to me. Like Jimmy is not doing what he was doing in the Milwaukee series. Like I mentioned, he's been hurt. He's probably still a little bit hurt. He kind of turned it on a little bit in the last game, but he didn't really put up peripheral stats to give you that fantasy score we need. And so I'm like Jimmy. I'm still getting to Jimmy today a little bit, but I'm not as confident. One thing I mentioned in the Discord last time was Jamal and Jimmy are really close in price, and I kind of thought that either Jimmy is too cheap or Jamal was overpriced. And I said, I kind of lean towards Jamal being overpriced. Like, maybe that's wrong because now just I don't know. Jamal's usage is so high. He's going to put up all the shots. If MPJ isn't contributing, then who else is going to score points besides Jamal and Jokic? So I think we want to play Bam at captain and then mix in like Jokic and Jamal just seem like such safe plays for small field.
Fair enough. I mean, I was going to ask you about Butler anyways. Again, he's 12,200 on DraftKings. Hasn't hit the optimal in any of the 3 games so far. I mean, what's he got to take? Just got a major turnaround in the game plan and his approach, his health even, to be in the optimal? I mean, at what point is he – because Chris was one of the first questions in the chat. What's up, Chris? He says, who is the worst possible play on the board that people are actually using? Like, is it Butler? Like, does he have zero chance of making the optimal at this price the way he's playing? Or is he let's Galaxy brain it, let's flip it, and he's actually a great play because he's so low owned for his price?
Well, if we're just looking at like the numbers, the projection wise, then Jimmy is probably the worst play of those of the 3 payups, Jokic, Jamal, and then just Bam's price versus Jimmy's. It allows you to do that. $3,000 is really valuable. That's a pretty, I mean, that upgrades Duncan Robinson to Gabe Vincent or Caleb Martin. And so that's a pretty big deal. But for me, Jimmy, it's like he has the potential to put up 70. How often is he going to do that? Like, a question I was going to ask before was, how often does Jimmy Butler outscore Jokic in a game, in a 7-game series? And I would have said maybe once, but now I don't even know.
0.
Like, yeah, it's really unlikely. I mean, Jimmy would have to just go off to get there. And so, like I said, I still have Jimmy in my pool, but he's a player that I'm not prioritizing. I'm not focusing on him. Bam, I think, is my favorite play from the Heat. And then Kyle Lowry. They lowered Kyle Lowry's price and raised Gabe Vincent. I don't really get that. I think it should have been the opposite. But so now there's more of a discussion between Gabe Vincent and Kyle Lowry, even though Gabe Vincent's going to play more minutes. But
right.
the point is just that it's tough to get to Jimmy.
All right, well, let's have that discussion. Lowry now at 4,600 on DK. Vincent up to 6K. You're the expert here. I'll defer to you on. It's a $1,400 difference. Is it worth it? You already mentioned that the price changes probably aren't reflective of what their usage and their value should be. But what do you expect their ownerships to be in this game, and how would you utilize both these guys?
Well, the model's showing Gabe Vincent for 2% captain, Kyle Lowry also 2% captain, and then 21 and 25% in the flex. I think it'll be slightly higher than that, but not too much. And if it's under 30 for both of them, like, I'm going to be overweight on Kyle Lowry certainly, and then Gabe Vincent I'm also going to be overweight on. It's just tough because game 2, like, we usually would expect them to close the game together the entire fourth quarter. That didn't happen in game 2. In game 3, they mostly played the whole fourth quarter in game 3. So I don't know. Like I said, I think this is the rotation that Eric Spoelstra wants, but he's also one of the best coaches at making adjustments, and so I wouldn't be surprised if something changed. but I think we should expect Kyle Lowry and Gabe Vincent to both close the fourth quarter in most situations. So they're both fine plays. You can play them together.
All right, cool. All right, cool. So if you guys have any further questions, let's get in. We've been here for 15 minutes. We'll stick around if there are more questions. So any final questions you have about this game, lineup construction, low owned plays, go ahead and throw it in the chat here on YouTube. We'll happily answer them for you. And when I say we, I mean Chuck will happily answer them for you because you don't want my specific advice. So, Chuck, I have to ask this every single game. Any chance we get a one percenter in the winning lineup? Like what would it have to take for a non-Brown, Brown, Love, Jeff Green, Highsmith, Zeller, even Highsmith and Zeller at this point? What would it take for them or below to get into the optimal?
Playing, period. Like Cody Zeller, like Cody. So when these guys get into the optimal, Cody Zeller and Haywood Highsmith, they're 1,200 and 1,400. I think it's more a function of the other players putting up certain fantasy scores we need rather than these guys doing well. Like I mentioned, the way that these guys make it in the winning lineup is just we need the salary relief, regardless if they put up 1 or 4 or 0 fantasy points. But Cody Zeller, I'm having a really tough time getting to. It's just with the pricing is kind of cheap. Like Duncan Robinson, K Love, Christian Brown, Struess, Kyle Lowry are all under 5K. And so, like I mentioned a little bit when I was going through my lineups, I'm not getting to a ton of lineups with one of these cheap guys in it. It doesn't seem super necessary today. And so, what would it take for them to be in it? Probably a massive blowout, and these guys playing 12 minutes in the fourth quarter, honestly.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So Highsmith, obviously we talked about the easy fade in game 2. Talked about potentially going back to him in game 3. Played even less minutes in game 3, just 2 minutes. And again, from as a casual observer, seeing that he put up 27 fantasy points in 23 minutes, is there any chance that he plays more than single-digit minutes this time around? Seeing as they're down 2-1, they saw some success with him in game 1. Any chance we see him, which I assume will be low ownership after playing 2 minutes?
Yeah, I mean, going back to the game theory stuff that you're talking about a few minutes ago, I mean, he's going to come in with no ownership today. No one's expecting him to play. If he plays and you have him, then you're among, I don't know, 3% maybe that are going to play him today. And so it's a very, very low percentage outcome that Haywood Highsmith plays, and because he has to get on the court and then he has to perform while he's on the court. So we need a couple different things to happen. And so if you're only making one lineup, I wouldn't even touch these guys. But if you have a big, like if you're making a bunch of lineups like I am, then you can mix in Highsmith a bit. I have 0% right now. Maybe I'll force in 1% or 2, but I don't know. I don't really see it as that necessary today. But if you want to take the risk, I mean, that's how we have to do something to take down these big contests. And I mean, it's possible. It's NBA DFS. Anything can happen. It's a very low percent outcome, I think.
Exactly. All right. Well, good to hear. And then we did get one question I skipped over. Keon, if I'm mispronouncing your name, I'm sorry. Let me know how it's pronounced so I get it right for next time. It says, who are the good low-owned plays in the pro spot on FanDuel? So for the uninitiated, you have the MVP, which is 2 times scoring. Then you have the star spot, which is 1.5, and the pro 1.2 times multiplier. I mean, typically what I've seen, Chuck, just looking over there, I know you said you haven't played much this playoffs, but it's like 70% Jokic MVP. You play him because he's going to be the highest scorer. Then it's whoever the next highest scorer is, right? So Jamal, usually, Bam, potentially. And then the third is just not necessarily who the third highest scorer is, but is the third highest who fits within that salary cap, right? So I think it was Aaron Gordon the last game. You're not going to get 3 studs in there unless you get 2 low-owned plays, and that's not going to happen. So really what you're looking is either find somebody that no one's playing in the pro spot, or you find you flip flop the star and the pro spots. I think that's what they're called, right? You flip flop those, and you get lower ownership that way. But to me, that seems less likely in this particular series, just because of the high ceilings of Murray, of Bam being played in that second spot.
Yeah, on FanDuel, it's a little bit different with Bam too, because so Jokic, I think, is probably just a lock for MVP. I think you can play him MVP and not think twice about it. But then Jamal, Jimmy, and Bam are all within 1,000 of each other. It's much different than on DraftKings, and so I'd love to see the ownerships over on FanDuel. I imagine Bam will be slightly lower owned than the other guys, or slightly lower owned than he is on DraftKings relative anyway. But yeah, fitting in 2 of those guys into the MVP and the star spots, and then I don't know, just figuring out between Aaron Gordon, MPJ, Gabe Vincent, Caleb Martin, even Kyle Lowry, who can possibly be in that pro spot. One thing that I do like to do, so if you're only making 1 or 2 lineups or a few lineups on FanDuel, and you have your perfect lineup, MVP, star, pro, like Brian just said, switch the pro and star. You're still going to cash if it's a good lineup, but it's going to give you a much better chance at chopping for less when that lineup finishes first. When we get that unlikely outcome of, you know, I don't even know who could do it. When MPJ puts up 40 and Bam only puts up 39, so MPJ is the winning star. It just, like I said, you're going to, if it's the opposite, like the one that we expect, like Jokic, Bam, MPJ, and you play Jokic, MPJ, Bam, like I said, you're still going to cash the tournament, and the dollar value is not going to be that much less than what it would have been, but you're just giving yourself a much better chance at not chopping 100 ways or whatever.
Exactly. And the same goes, honestly, for your flex spot in that third spot, the pro spot, too. You'd be shocked. I guess maybe you wouldn't be shocked if you study human behavior. But on FanDuel, especially in any showdown format, in any sport, the field has to play the higher price player at the multiplier spot, whether it's NFL Showdown, whether it's MLB. So if, for instance, MPJ is 9,500 and Bruce Brown's 9K, even if they were similarly projected, MPJ would have a much higher pro ownership just because he's $500 more than Brown, and people have to use that salary. And they possibly think that a cheaper guy could get there. So when in doubt, flip flop, like Chuck said, or use the lower salary guy from your flex to your pro spot. It's the easiest way to get lower ownership over there, Chuck.
Yeah, I think that's perfect. You said it great.
Okay, cool. All right, guys, we'll close out the show here. Any final questions? Get them in. If not, if you miss it, if you're watching this on replay, I won't be in there, but I'm sure Chuck and others will be in there in the NBA Discord channel, occupyfantasy.com/Discord. The link is in the description. Make sure you join it. Come chat with us, sweat it out with us, and talk NBA basketball. We'd love to have you in there as well. The NBA model, which you see on screen here, is up and running. In case there's a random starting lineup change, the model will be updated. It updates every 2 minutes, so make sure you go check that out to build your lineups tonight. And I think that's it. Chuck, any final thoughts on this game?
Just there's a couple guys I think that are getting forgotten. I mentioned them last time, KCP and Bruce Brown. They've been not good this series, and their ownership is going to keep falling. But and the thing is, like I mentioned, Kyle Lowry's a better play, Gabe Vincent's a better play, but these guys are going to be a little bit lower owned. So I think we want to mix them in if you're making a bunch of lineups. And then I still like Duncan Robinson as a GPP dart. He's very risky. He's probably not going to do much, but if he does, then I think he's great to mix in, especially since he's right around Kevin Love's price.
Good stuff. Again, yeah, we always see someone or maybe a couple of these guys get squeezed out when it comes to ownership because the guys a little bit above them or below them project better. In NBA, it's so cut and dry and who's the better play, quote unquote. And so we'll see these guys get cut out as far as ownership goes. So that certainly makes an easy decision when you're looking for differentiation in your high-risk NBA DFS lineups. If you like what you've seen, make sure you subscribe to the channel here on YouTube. It's free to do. You'll get notified when we go live for these NBA final streams. Probably only 2 more. No, actually, probably only 1 more, but we'll see. Just make sure you subscribe. That's the best way to get notified. And if you appreciate the content, the best way you can show your appreciation is to give us a thumbs up here on YouTube. You can also subscribe to Occupy. That helps us out as well. But the thumbs up is free to do, and it's easy. It takes 2 seconds, and we appreciate that. Lets us know your appreciation, and we'll continue to do these shows. So for Chuck, follow him on Twitter at ChuckSilverDFS. Follow me at Brian Jester FF. We're also at Occupy Fantasy on Twitter. Thanks for listening. Good luck. NBA Finals Game 4.
See you guys. Thanks.